the 1930s about these findings and everything that they had discovered and how people just couldn't believe it, but they had the scientific proof, which we got later on again in 1982 with this research. So we're talking about between the 1930s up to 1982, we had more than enough proof, scientific 100% proven proof that African people was in these lands long before the so-called Native Americans. Documented, genetic proof, right? So in the 1930s, they put this stuff in the newspaper, like it says here. More than 50 years ago, the very distinguished anthropological writer Carlos Corvo Marquez, in his treatise on the early Indians of America, postulated the existence of Black Africa in the plateau of Central America. The learned American writers on this question commit themselves against the theory that there were African Negroes among the earliest inhabitants in America. In fact, as a whole, this school of thought is agreed against any inclination or suggestion that will omit any Negro element in the ethnic construction of the Amerindian, except Dr. Boas, whose broad and outstanding views on the subject are well known. However, Senor Marquez mentions cases and data in his archaeological findings that leave no doubt of the Negro element in Central America. In a reaction to his own hypothesis, he says, a large part of America was populated by an inferior race of Negroid type. The conquerors found them dispersed over the whole extension of the New World. Small tribes that from the first moment were considered as belonging to the Negro race. At Agua Bonita, near the valley of its name, about 20 miles from the city of La Plata, there was found by an Indian named Cotashia a prehistoric village that had disappeared for centuries. The natives who resided there during the discovery of the New World had no knowledge of the place. The sculptures of San Augustine in Colombia belong to a remote age and of a nation many centuries ago extinguished. Their work preserved the marked affinity between the statues of San Augustine and the Mexican sculptures of the same period. The Negro is shown in the colossal head of Huapian and the gigantic hatchet of Veracruz. Aztec libraries destroyed. In Mexico, where Cortez conquered and destroyed the Aztec civilization, no effort was made to safeguard and protect the relics of that exceptional culture and glorious American epical civilization. The libraries of the learned Aztec people were destroyed. And that's because when you go look back at some of the earliest depictions of Aztec people before they were completely wiped out, this is what they look like. So understand, in the 1930s, they're talking about this information, this research they have done, and all the proof they had to show and prove that Africans, Black people, were native to America and were in the Americas long before Columbus, long before these so-called people who they call the Native Americans. This information was going out. This is from a newspaper, as I've shown you guys. That's from the 1930s. It's a real newspaper. So you have that in the 1930s, and then we have in 1982 with Walter Neves and Lucia, and the bones and everything that they were finding, but they had already found this stuff a long time ago. They were just finding a lot more over time. You have, of course, the Olmec heads and everything they were finding as well. So all this stuff is starting to come out, and it's been coming out for a long time, but they already knew this information. So the point is, they had this information for years that we were here and indigenous to this land, yet nobody fought for us. And that is the point. That is the difference between everything else. One, of course, nobody was the native, the so-called Native Americans, they were putting on suits and going to court. The people were united, they were protesting, and that's the difference. This, like, we're surrounded by so much ignorance, like people like this guy, that we can't make this stuff happen, because if the white man don't tell us what history is, we won't accept it from nobody else. Y'all waiting for the news to tell y'all what history is, but these people have already told you. Books have already been written. The history is out there. It's proven. It's documented. Scientific, genetic. We have all the proof. But until your masters tell you which way to go, you don't listen. You listen to niggas like this guy. It's bullshit. One, since they protested, they marched, they had a big show of force to try to get reparations for their situation because, one, they considered themselves to be, you know, the original native people, but they already was put on a campaign to put this stuff out, which is why they were paid. Because then, if they're paid, as I said, it takes away from the validity of Black people being here originally by us not being united and having a party and the people to speak up for us and to bring all this information in front of Congress, in front of the Senate, in front of the world and people to rally for us to speak out and say, hey, we have this proof from the 30s. We have this proof from the 80s. We have proof that's older than that. We have your own scientists and researchers from around the world who all have proof that we were here and this land was taken from us. Where's reparations? And it's one of the things that is, being missed, and there's been an unbelievable cover up. One, they destroy all of the statues and artifacts and everything. And very recently, what is that? 2018. So these bones I'm talking about, the oldest bones in America, Luzier, her bones, not just that, ancient Egyptian artifacts that they found here in America. It's in the museum in Brazil. What happened to that museum in 2018 It was burnt down. All that research, a lot of those artifacts went up, gone, burnt. So again, this is just one when you're having this argument going on and this is around the time Obama's administration. So maybe somebody was upset, but we have these artifacts and we have this proof, who was here first and who was indigenous to this land and everything that takes place after that. So again, the argument has been happening for a long time, but these are some of the things that are just not argued because they want you to rely on just the negative part of what happened with Jim Crow, what happened with civil rights. That's what people are looking at. And then slavery itself, because they want you to focus on that part and say, well, slavery was wrong, pay these people their money, and not focus on the fact that, the history of this country is a lie. The way it's been told is a lie. These people are liars. They took this land from the indigenous people who was here first. Those people who he called primitive, which of course they wasn't primitive or unsophisticated and no right. These were Moors. These were people who was here. These people who was dressed like the so-called Native Americans came from a civilization who was sophisticated, who knew shit. They were here long before anybody. We already have documented proof that they was coming over from West Africa and North Africa, hundreds of years ago. We talked about that with the Songhai Empire, who already documented them coming to the Americas long before they were taken down. So we already have this proof. We have too much proof, but it's just nobody to argue the proof, nobody to fight and lobby for us to get what we're supposed to get. You have these puppets up here who's trying to X out what I'm talking about here and make it all about slavery when we have more of a legitimate claim besides what took place during slavery, besides what took place, Jim Crow, what have you. That's just part of it. We have a more legitimate claim, understanding that this was our land and we was here first. Again, the same question. If you gave the Native Americans reparations, tax-free status, if you gave them that with absolutely no documented proof, no legal proof or any type of documented proof to prove that these people were indigenous to this land, first of all, one, they're a mixture. It's enough said right there. And that's known. They're a mixture. They're not a pure race. So obviously they're a mixture, meaning that the mixture that they are made up of, those people had to be here first. Understand? So it's already too much proof, common sense proof of who was here first. The fact that we can prove, one, that all these people derived from the African should be enough. But we can also prove, one, two, that we was here, documented here in the Americas long before slavery, South America, North America, more than enough proof. So to say we shouldn't give reparations, and Native Americans got it, Jews got it, it's Japanese Americans got it for the internment camps that happened with World War II. How have we not gotten it when we have more of a claim to it than anybody? So this argument has been going on for a while now. It's been popping up. the whole black selling blacks into slavery. I debunked all that bullshit. I proved all that shit nonsense. Anthony Johnson, what have you, first black slave owner, first black person who had somebody, a black person enslaved for life, which I proved in the video. That's bullshit. The picture that they got up there is not even him. So it's just stuff that's put out there that people are eating up. There's a lot of videos on YouTube from black people that's looking at this shit and believing it without doing no research. They're making whole videos on this shit and just saying, oh, how's brother going to own slaves, and not even understand the context of it. And that this stuff is being put out to try to, devalue the argument of, slavery, black people endured, and why reparations is something that we're supposed to get. This whole thing is to basically devalue the argument, to basically try to justify slavery in some way, which is ridiculous. Hundreds of years of slavery and everything that happened during slavery and after slavery. Black people selling black people into slavery in no way makes up for all that shit. Because again, if somebody came to you and said, hey, you want to buy this little girl, and you bought her, that makes you even more or just as much as sick as the person who sold her. First of all, you're supposed to look at yourself as being a more sophisticated group of people. Why would you buy a person? And then, it's not about you buying a person. And, you got to look at the whole term of it, indentured slave or indentured servant or what have you, and say, hey, some of these people is getting paid. And if you're going to buy a person to get them to work for you and you paying them, that's not slavery. That's a worker. That's not servitude. That's a worker. They're getting paid. Now, if you buy this so-called slave and they're working for you and you treating them good and feeding them and so on and so forth and compensating them, then that's different. This is not what happened. You bought people and you killed them. You murdered them. You raped them, impregnated them, ripped their babies out, and fell into alligators. All kinds of sick shit, hung them from trees, set them on fire. No, we're going to ignore all that and say, well, you guys deserved it because a few of you bought black slaves. It's bullshit. It in no way equates or justifies anything. People like this dude and anybody who believes in this stupid argument don't know history and don't have no clue about what's going on and what's been happening. This is just a little small taste of the history and proof that's out there to show you what actually happened. There's too many pictures, too much documented proof, more than what I showed you guys in this video and previous videos that makes our case. And it's absolutely ridiculous that at this time now, reparations have not been passed. The bill has not been passed. It's bullshit. It's bullshit. So, the people who's arguing against it, it's crazy. It's the most ridiculous thing that still exists that has been legally passed in human history when we look at what took place during slavery and a result of it that benefited Europeans and still benefits them to this day. The fact that racism exists and is holding a people down, oppressing the people constantly for centuries now because of slavery and because of the cover-up and everything that took place after that. So we can look at the whole thing and say, this is our argument. As I said before, I would love to be the one who argued this thing. I will wipe it out, knock it out the park. But we can look at history and look at all the proof and say, here it is. And it's more than enough for it not even be a rebuttal. This is a settle out of court type of thing. There is no argument. There's we don't want to go to court with this information. We're just going to pay you type of situation. But since these people own the media, they control and own everything, we're not going to have such a thing. Even them talking about it now, it's just, distraction, smoke and mirrors. So we'll see what happens with the whole thing. But yeah, just wanted to get into this real quick and touch on it. Thanks to everybody who showed up for the live. Have another one coming up soon. But I wanted to get into this information. I didn't want to forget to put this video out because you guys, if you haven't seen it already, it's being talked about a lot more. So here's the facts in this video. You watch the ancient history series. I talked about it in that, show more proof. But it's deep. It's deep. The rabbit hole is deep on this situation. But yeah, don't want to take up too much time, but thanks for taking the time to watch. As I said, the links are in the description for anybody who's still trying to get in Merkabah Scholar Society. Final phase, get in now. But yeah, thanks for watching. See you next video.